I know you think you're the smartest guy in the room, but you sound like a jackass when you attack his family like this. But I know what he did for unwed mothers. I know what he did for alcoholics. I know what he did for drug addicts.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
I did not attack his family, and no fair-minded view of yours will say that.
When Jerry Falwell died, most of the media called him a man of faith and a pillar of American values. But Christopher Hitchens didn't hold back. He called Falwell a fraud, a hypocrite, and even said it was a pity there isn't a hell for him to go to. Let's watch this.
The controversial televangelist was a polarizing figure, emboldening conservative Christians while alienating many liberals, but there's no question about the impacting legacy Falwell leaves behind. Joining us now is Republican strategist Ralph Reed and author of God Is Not Great, columnist Christopher Hitchens, who made news last night with his harsh critique of the Reverend. Christopher, let me start with you here and talk about the things you've said, which obviously we know where you stand on religion, we know where you stand on Reverend Falwell. By being so angry about what his legacy was and is, are you not hurting his family and others who may have no dog in that hunt, but who would just like a few moments to celebrate his life and have some peace?
Well, I don't care whether his family's feelings are hurt or not, but if they are, they can take comfort from the extraordinary piety and stupidity and, generally speaking, uniformity of the coverage of the man's death. It is, after all, was said by the supposed Jesus of Nazareth to his followers that they must expect to be mocked for their beliefs, because their beliefs will appear to many people to be ridiculous, if not worse than that, and that they are to take it for granted that they will be ridiculed. That's true, I think, of the most devout and serious and thoughtful Christian, but for a vulgar fraud and crook like the Reverend Falwell, it's an obligation to say what one thinks about him, or be left off the air and have people like yourselves broadcasting only piety. And that
I'm not broadcasting only piety. I did my radio show, and now we're having you on here to talk about your view, very different than what else the media is saying.
You're having me on and then arguing that maybe it's bad taste to have me on. I don't think that's very
I thought it was a legitimate question, because I think people are wondering.
Yeah, well, I've answered it. I've answered the question.
You have, and I will now move on to Ralph Reed, now that you've answered that question. Ralph, does Christopher Hitchens have a point? It is a free speech issue. He was a polarizing figure, Reverend Falwell was, and there are many people, maybe not all of them feeling as strong as Christopher Hitchens, but who feel that Reverend Falwell was indeed a polarizing figure who said things that offended many Americans.
Well, you know, look, any time, Alan, that you are an agent of change the way Dr. Falwell was, who had the kind of impact that he had on American religion, on our culture, and on our politics, he was one of the most important historical figures of the last 50 years in each of those areas, ending the self-imposed exile of evangelicals from civic and cultural engagement, and I think transforming them into one of the most important and vibrant and energetic constituencies in the entire electorate. No one does that, liberal or conservative, Republican, Democrat, of any faith. Well, and not stir controversy. But it's just my belief as an American, not as a conservative, not as somebody of any particular denominational background or faith, but just as an American, in terms of elevating the civility of our discourse, that when somebody dies, that we ought to show a measure of respect and appreciation for their family and for their loved ones and for those who are grieving right now, and our thoughts and prayers ought to be with them, regardless of whether we agreed with Dr. Falwell.
Christopher Hitchens.
Oh, come on. Play the world's smallest violin. Listen, he established a business, a racket, in my opinion. He was a religious businessman in the same way as Mr. Ralph Reed is a religious entrepreneur. He's left the business to his children. It's a hereditary job. Let that console them. You can't have me on and say that I have to say, I'm terribly sorry he's dead. One reason you can't ask me to do that is because I am not. I think we have been rid of an extremely dangerous demagogue who lived by hatred of others and prejudice, and who committed treason by saying that the United States deserved the attack upon it and its civil society in
Christopher,
September 2001 by other religious nutcases like himself.
He profoundly and repeatedly apologized, and I'm sure you're perfect in your life. I'm sure you're perfect in your life, and that you've never made any mistakes.
I've never committed treason like that. I don't believe in the sincerity of his apology.
Let's look at the thoughtlessness and the mean-spiritedness of your very remarks that you've made about Reverend Falwell.
By all means.
You think it's a pity that there isn't a hell for him to go to, you said.
Yes, I do.
On his death, you write, the discovery of the carcass of Reverend Falwell on the floor of his obscure office is, almost zero significance, except for perhaps two categories of people, etc. You also say the evil he did will live after him.
Yes.
I knew Reverend Falwell, Christopher. I know the good work that this man has done.
Tell me about it.
Well, for
takes a lot to make me cry.
I know you think you're the smartest guy in the room, but you sound like a jackass when you attack his family like this. But I know what he did for unwed mothers. I know what he did for alcoholics. I know what he did for drug addicts.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
I did not attack his family, and no fair-minded view of yours will say that. I'm not going to be conscripted into saying that it's my job, when you invite me on to discuss this man, first to say how sorry I am for him and his family. That isn't what I feel. You, no doubt, as a Christian, or whatever you are, require hypocrisy of people. I'm sorry you're asking the wrong person.
But I am asking for human decency, and if you don't think it has an impact on his family, to use even the phrases tonight, that he's vulgar, fraud, and a crook, and then to say that the discovery of his carcass, I think you are incredibly mean, incredibly selfish, and incredibly thoughtless.
You invited me, sir, to give my opinion of the departed. I give it to you, and you say, well, might that not upset his family? I said it while he was alive.
Give his opinion
might that not have upset his family too?
You give the opinion about him, and I'm giving the opinion about you and the thoughtlessness of your remarks here. And I'm really calling for any human decency that you may have in your pseudo-intellectually...
Christopher Hitchens wasn't attacking a grieving family. He was exposing a pattern of hypocrisy wrapped in religion. Falwell wasn't just a preacher. He built a political machine that used faith to divide Americans. History backs this up. Falwell founded the Moral Majority in 1979, which pushed Christian nationalism into U.S. politics, opposing civil rights for gay people and defending segregationist schools. That's not morality, that's control. Hitchens reminded viewers that even Jesus, according to the Gospels, said his followers would be mocked because their beliefs would sound foolish to others. So criticism isn't hate. It's part of free inquiry. The Bible itself says in Proverbs 14:15, "The simple believe anything, but the prudent give thought to their steps." Questioning religious authority is prudence. Calling Falwell a fraud had factual grounding too. Falwell's ministries faced financial scandals and misleading fundraising claims. Time magazine and the Washington Post documented millions raised for missions that benefited his own organizations.
We continue now. Republican strategist Ralph Reed and columnist and author Christopher Hitchens. Christopher, I interviewed you a little bit about your book just a short time ago. And it made me think a lot. Jerry Falwell, because I do know him, he does a lot for people that are in trouble. He gave a lot of scholarships to his school. He helped women that were pregnant and needed help. He'd give them food and a place to live and an education. He did a lot to people that are alcoholics and et cetera, et cetera. You have your hostility towards religion, and that's without saying. I just wonder, when you compare his life, there are a lot of good atheist communists out there like Stalin and Mao and Pol Pot, and, they slaughtered millions. Jerry Falwell slaughtered nobody in his life. He may have misspoke once or twice, but he devoted his life to his religion. Do you have nothing good to say about him at all?
No, I repeat, Jerry Falwell lived on hatred and superstition and bigotry. He preached dislike of people whose lives he knew nothing about. He raised money from credulous fools.
You don't know anything about his life.
Now, excuse me, sir. You can either ask me on and ask my opinion, or you may not. But I don't have to be here if you're going to take that attitude.
Well, you could leave.
You spent the first half by saying I had no right to the opinion you'd asked me on to express. Now, you're tiring me out. I repeat, though.
No, what I said is your opinion was thoughtless. What you wrote was crude and mean and hateful. That's what I said.
You took up all the time for my answer with your long, rather unlettered question.
Oh, okay.
Jerry Falwell made a career out of sponsoring dislike and superstition, said that people he didn't like were going to hell, said the United States deserved to be attacked by Islamic fascists, said he believed that people would be raptured into heaven, leaving all the rest of us to wallow behind. I think his death is a deliverance. And if you say that someone who occasionally makes a charitable donation is a good person, then you have to say that Hamas and Hezbollah, who do all this charitable giving and charitable organizing, are the same.
In a country that celebrates it, Ralph Reed.
Sean, you know, look,
and why not a word now from the friend of Jack Abramoff?
Wait, we only have a moment here, Ralph. Here's an important question about. Well, let me get Ralph in here. Here's an important question about Jerry Falwell.
That's all it needs now.
Ralph,
let's hear from the Abramoff faction.
We only have a moment left. Ralph gets to speak
rip-off artists. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
Hold on, Christopher. Ralph, the big controversy about Jerry Falwell was he fused religion and politics, and that's what people will be debating, I guess, going forward. And after he said he would not do such a thing, would Jesus have advocated the GOP, and was he right to bring in and marry those two and give that impression? We only have a very short time left, Ralph.
Well, I don't think that's ever what Dr. Falwell said. What he said was that there were certain transcendent values, such as the protection of innocent human life, the sanctity of marriage, the need to defend the state of Israel, his opposition to communism, his opposition to radical jihadism, and what he believed was that those values should be reflected in public policy. And I think that, you know, when you have a community of Liberty University with its 10,000 students in residence, you have 22,000 members of his church, you have millions of others of people who looked up to him and admired him, I would really hope that people like Christopher would show the decency and respect to let those people mourn and remember his memory without being torn down and attacked.
Tell it your business partner.
Good try, Christopher.
Tell it your personal friend of mine, and I'll miss him. When we come back, Tyler gets too close to a dancing performance.
When Hannity tried to defend Falwell by saying he helped single mothers and alcoholics, Hitchens didn't deny that. What he was pointing out is that doing good deeds doesn't erase decades of harm. Falwell spent his career spreading fear and prejudice. He said 9/11 was God's punishment for America's sins, blaming gay people and feminists. That's not compassion. That's manipulation through guilt and shame. And comparing atheists to dictators like Stalin or Mao is just lazy. Those regimes didn't kill in the name of atheism. They acted out of political control and cult-like authority. If anything, they behaved like religions that demanded total obedience. History shows that morality doesn't come from belief in God. Studies from the Journal of Religion and Society and Pew Research have shown that secular countries like Sweden and Japan consistently rank higher in honesty, education, and humanitarian aid than deeply religious ones. Hitchens' point was simple. Falwell built his empire on superstition and fear. Saying he did charity work doesn't erase the damage of telling millions that they're going to hell for being different. Real morality is how we treat others, not what we claim to believe.
Move on to the Reverend Jerry Falwell's funeral. You won't believe what one of my next guests is saying about his legacy.
It shows how much vulgarity and fraud and bigotry you can get away with on mainstream airwaves in this country as long as you have the word reverend in front of your name.
Atheist Christopher Hitchens takes on Jerry Falwell's legacy, as well as one of the Reverend's admirers, next. He opened tonight the controversy over the legacy of the Reverend Jerry Falwell. Falwell died last week of heart trouble at the age of 73. At his funeral today, thousands of mourners packed the Virginia church Falwell founded 50 years ago, the church he built into an evangelical empire. Falwell was a polarizing figure in American politics for decades, thanks to the Moral Majority, the organization he founded to promote his vision of American values. At the service today, the Reverend Franklin Graham said those values are what made him controversial.
He believed in the inerrancy of Scripture. That's controversial. He believed in the sanctity of life, was against abortion. That's controversial. He believed in the family. And who would have ever thought that would be controversial? He believed in marriage was the union between a man and a woman. He believed that the moral decay weakened the fabric of America. That's controversial.
Joining me now to debate Falwell's legacy, writer Christopher Hitchens, who says Falwell was a fraud. Hitchens' latest book is God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. Also with me, someone who sees Falwell's legacy much differently, writer Eric Metaxas, author of Everything Else You Always Wanted to Know About God, but Were Afraid to Ask. Gentlemen, glad to have you both. Christopher, let me start with you. Falwell was controversial. You heard the Reverend Graham say it right there. Isn't that a good thing? You're controversial. It gets people thinking and discussing and debating.
To be sure, and I wouldn't be on this show if you weren't giving me the opportunity to be rude about a man on the day he's buried.
You've called Reverend Falwell a horrible little person, a vulgar fraud, and a crook. You've also said it's a pity there isn't a hell for him to go to.
Do you want to just spend all your time whimpering about what I've said, or do you have any comments?
Well, no, I'm curious why you think he was such an idiot. I mean, there were thousands and thousands of people that followed him and believed in him. Are you saying that everybody that believed in him?
That's been true. That's been true of every fraud in history. I'll tell you why I think so. First, he believed in the rapture, in the idea that people like him were going to be snatched up, especially by Jesus, leaving the rest of us to die in the cars.
But hold on. Didn't you say that you don't think he believed in those things?
He believed in creation. He believed in creationism.
You said he didn't believe in those things.
He believed that the Antichrist was a Jewish male who was already amongst us.
Excuse me, the Christ was also a Jewish male. The Christ was a Jewish male. If you believe he existed, I'm not sure that you do. But the point is that I get confused.
I'm not sure that he did. No.
Pardon? Well, you're not sure he did, but the point is to say something like that. You're being merely incendiary, because the other day you said you didn't believe that.
Wine again.
Well, you said whimper earlier. You have to pick your pejorative verb. But the point is that you can't have it both ways. And I'm not trying to be incendiary, but I'm trying to figure out what your actual criticism is. Because you can't say that somebody believed these things and that's why he's a crackpot and an idiot, and then say that he only was in it for the money. Because that's what you were saying the other day.
He didn't say only for the money, but he used it as a fundraiser.
You said he didn't believe these things.
He did very well out of it. I can't be sure. He may have been both a hypocrite and a bigot.
Eric, what does he leave behind?
Division, obviously, in some ways. I mean, I think his legacy is certainly mixed. The things that Falwell believed in as a Christian are the things that any Christian believes in, and I think he in some ways very helpfully brought people who felt that they were out of the political process into the political process, and I think in some ways that was wonderful. I think it also contributed to a misunderstanding about what faith is, and I think that a lot of people confuse having faith as a Christian or a Jew particularly with morality.
I think that if you want to an encapsulation of his legacy, it shows how much vulgarity and fraud and bigotry you can get away with on mainstream airwaves in this country as long as you have the word reverend in front of your name.
You don't think Falwell you don't think Falwell was genuine at all in any way, shape, or form?
No, I think he was a genuine bigot, but I also think it's quite compatible with him being a huckster, a fundraiser, a friend of the Jim and Tammy Bakers, for example, and other rip-off artists, and a fraud. Yeah, he was amply both of those things.
But the things that you said only hours after he'd been pronounced dead, I thought were very unhelpful and exceedingly...
I said them all the time he was alive.
I said them every day he was alive
that's
as well. The point.
Final thought.
I think that, again, here's the point, at least, is that if you have legitimate criticisms, and of course you do, I would be the first to say that you do, you don't help your argument by saying them in the way that you did.
Oh, I'll be the judge of that. Leave that to me, Mr. Metaxas. I'll make my own case.
Why?
I didn't ask your advice, and I really don't think I'd profit from it.
Here I am to offer it.
We must leave it there. I appreciate you both.
When Hitchens said Falwell's death shows how much fraud and bigotry you can get away with if you call yourself reverend, he wasn't exaggerating. Falwell's entire career blurred the line between religion and politics, and it made him rich. Liberty University, which he founded, grew into a billion-dollar institution built on tax-exempt donations and political influence. That's not spiritual leadership. That's empire building. And let's be honest, the idea that Falwell just believed in family values sounds nice until you look closer. He preached against interracial marriage in the 1960s, called AIDS a punishment from God, and claimed the Antichrist would be a Jewish man. Those aren't moral positions. They're fear tactics. When the interviewer tried to say Falwell helped women or addicts, Hitchens pushed back because charity doesn't erase hate. Even extremist groups run food banks. Doing a few good deeds doesn't absolve someone who spent decades dividing people with superstition and political propaganda. The uncomfortable truth is, Falwell's moral majority wasn't about morality. It was about power. And Hitchens, as always, forced people to see the difference between kindness and control disguised as faith. What do you think? Was Hitchens right to call out religious hypocrisy, or should faith leaders like Falwell be remembered for their good deeds instead? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive.